as a sort of experiment, I decided to consider a movie, and I made a random choice of a movie. It's called An Act of War, and then started to watch it, having absolutely no idea what it's about, and tried to sort of decipher in the first few minutes, 5 minutes so far, and it's a rather sort of montage of thoughts that really still haven't led me to any sort of clear understanding of what the film's about. The images of a movie camera, a bullet, a man with gloves on so that he doesn't leave his fingerprints. Lots of right. The second comment on this movie. There's I think it's American anyway, because the voice is American. We have this guy in his sort of shorts, underpants, sitting in a room, and it's at night time, and the time goes off at 8 o'clock, and he's drinking, and it reminded me quite a lot of the beginning of Apocalypse Now, when Willard is waiting for a mission in his hotel room. It suggests that this guy might be waiting for a mission, but it's the 60s, so it could be Vietnam, I suppose. But when he peers out of the window through the blinds, which is also a copycat of Apocalypse Now, there's a lot of traffic in the street, and it's at night, and the cars are, as I say, 60s. I sense that it's in London, but I'm not too sure. Next stage of the puzzle. He seems to be conducting some form of surveillance from his room, and he receives a phone call from a woman who I suspect is either a girlfriend or his wife, and she brings up his brother. Has he seen him? And he reacts very negatively towards this possibility. What his brother has done that he's unhappy about is a total mystery, and even at this stage, it's still very unclear as to what this film is really about. I'm doing this as an exercise, really, because I think sometimes it becomes extremely difficult to work out the plots of films, and the directors seem to prefer to take essential information out to try and make you work hard as a viewer to try and grasp what's happening. And I don't really quite understand this, really, because a film really ought to give you a pretty clear picture of what it's about, its main plot feel, within about 10 minutes. To use an example of Apocalypse Now, we start out with the scene with Willard in a hotel room getting drunk out of his smoke and talking about his marriage being on the rocks. And then it becomes clear when the GIs come up to his room a little later that he has a special position in the military, and of course it's based in Vietnam. And then he gets escorted to a place where the senior brass lay out what they expect him to do. And within 10 minutes, you've got a pretty clear picture of where it is, what's going to happen, and no ambiguity. with this film, I'm totally at a loss, really, other than the fact that he's military, he's conducting surveillance, um, that previously a member of the armed forces had died, so he may well be trying to work out how that happened. But it's very, very difficult to work out. This character leaves the apartment where he's conducting his surveillance, takes the subway train, and he's followed. He then returns and meets some guy who seems to have some authority over him, and he's requesting a day off. And there's a conversation with this, I don't know whether he's his employer or somebody with some sort of authority. And the conversation doesn't really help with explaining what's going on. He then goes to a diner. It's still night time. And after nearly choking, he's at this sort of diner stroke bar. I'm not quite sure it's a diner or a bar or whatever. It's probably a bit of both in America now. And the person who's followed him seems to be also at the location. A black guy then approaches him in the diner and starts going on about marijuana being the most popular drug used in the United States. And he suggests to Jacob, as we now know him, that he has seen him somewhere before, but it's probably that he's a pusher and he wants to try and sell some dope to him. And then this conversation becomes even more confusing as this black guy, Marlin his name, starts to speculate that if he owned a place like the diner, would he want people like himself to be in the place, suggesting that he considers himself a bit of a lowlife. But it's still very confusing, and we're 15 minutes into the movie. Right, I've gone to the Internet Movie Database and clicked on An Act of War, and the short description of the movie, and I quote, "A veteran tries to put his life back together but is drawn to deeds that may be more dangerous than his tour of duty." Okay, so I'm now going to go through. Right, now I'm going to read the review by this man, Dennis Schwartz. Okay? And I'll quote this, and then I'm going to watch the rest of the movie and see if any of this comes to light in the plot. Writer-director Ryan Kennedy, in his maiden directorial debut, goes the Scorsese Taxi 1976 route. I'm assuming that's Taxi Driver, with this challenging but grim low-budget indie tale shot on a digital camera called the Ari Alaxi. It paints a gloomy portrait of a messed up war hero soldier returning to civilian life with insomnia and a bad case of untreated post-traumatic stress disorder after being tortured as a POW for 8 months. Depressed good guy Jacob Nix, played by Russo, is a loner who lives in a cramped, tiny apartment that's filled with movie equipment in a poor Brooklyn neighborhood. Jacob works a dead-end job as a movie projectionist in a dumpy local movie house. The gaunt young man is relentlessly haunted by his army days and walks around at night like a zombie. That he received no assistance for his serious ailments by the government he served during wartime tells you all you have to know about how the government values its soldiers. Now, as I try and maneuver, the always brooding Jacob relieves his misery by visits to a hard-assed Russian-born prostitute, Ivana, who gives him sympathy lays, while openly treating him with contempt as a loser, but dumps him over a few incidents that violate her privacy. In an empty dining home and late at night, the grave shift worker Jacob meets a polite talking homeless black man named Marlon, who after treated generously for free coffee and a meal by the projectionist, turns the vulnerable guy onto heroin and he soon's become addicted. The alienated Jacob goes on a steeper decline as his addiction makes it not possible to function at work, and his unsympathetic movie house boss cans him. In his ongoing self-destruction, the former soldier can't adjust to civilian life and gets trapped in a world of illusion, misery, addiction and violence and can't stop his freefall. The soldier feels he can only come out of his shell by himself and does so in an unhealthy way when he sees himself as a man with nothing to lose and almost nothing to live for. The noir-like black and white cinematography, except for the beginning and ending, the frightening dark night shots of a seedy, deserted neighbourhood, and the winning, heartbreaking performance by Russ Russo makes this sad melodrama watchable, despite that it's not for everyone because of its unpleasant subject matter. The hard-hitting tale of human carnage hits too close to home in the contemporary scene to be dismissed without provoking some thought about how we treat our soldiers and how inhumane is our out-treatment of the mentally ill. Okay, right, so that's that review. Well, having watched 20 minutes of this, okay, soldier, sort of got that. Took me some miles to get the location as America, okay, but where he lives, the camera, absolutely no idea that he works in a movie house. So we'll see that later, I guess. And no idea that he was tortured as a prisoner of war for 8 months. And the war in question, one assumes, was Vietnam, because it's set in the 60s. But again, no inkling of that from what I've seen. And walks around at night like a zombie. Well, he walks to a diner. The black guy, certainly, I got the gist that he was trying to sell some drugs of some description, targeting the guy as perhaps looking like he could do with a shot. So got that bit, but the rest of it, it's still hazy, I think, and I'd like to know how Swartz got all this information about the first paragraph. Insomnia, well, yeah, I guess he could have insomnia. And PTSD, well, that would be a logical guess. So back into viewing the movie, and next up we get him visiting a cool girl. She's not American. The review suggests she's Russian. I don't know how you work that one out, but maybe that's just a guess. And then there's this very short, over-the-top sex scene where the whore is overreacting to how she's feeling, which is atypical, trying to convince the punter that they're really enjoying it when it's just a complete fake. And then he points out that he'd like her to come to his place, and he'd also like more than just the fuck. And she sort of dances around that idea, and then as he hands her the $200, she hints that maybe next week she'll come to his place, having previously said that she's not interested in any relationship with clients. So yeah, the whole 5 minutes or so was very tacky, and I suppose reflected the dreadful place that he went to, and this is clearly rented by this girl, and it's in a, could we say, less salubrious part of town, which is atypical of how this arrangement takes place for many in a city. Fucking Nix goes to a video rental store back in those old VHS days, and has a brief chat with the owner of the store, who's complaining about his children not contacting him on his 70th birthday. And he suggests to Nix, who he describes as a good boy, that he is in touch with his father every year on his father's birthday, and Nix doesn't respond. So we can interpret that either his father is dead, or or his mental condition is such that doesn't happen. We also see a brief a flash of him as a younger man receiving torture, but we still don't know where it is or any details about it. The actual film is not a VHS cassette tape. It's actually a movie tape for his movie projector. We're half an hour in, and we get a very intense emotional scene. The prostitute has gone to his bedsit, and she wants to find out why he is so sullen and seemingly in trauma. And eventually he says he doesn't want to talk about it, but eventually he does break down and describes his experience being subject to an ambush, and his colleagues, his fellow army, being cut down, and he describes in rather vivid detail the pain and the experience of war and the injuries that lead to an inevitable loss of life. The girl, having listened intently to him virtually breaking down, weeping, feeling so much guilt that he couldn't have helped save the life of his friend where the ambush took place, she concludes that she can't help him and leaves. Nix returns to the movie store, and he's also dealing with the owner, basically videotaping the sex with the girl, unbeknown to herself. And of course, the video that he's got also captures his intense emotional reaction, and he hands it over. It's a sort of barter situation. He supplies material and he receives material. That's what I gather. I then piece together the movie house, a previous scene with the owner who was praising Nix because he didn't fall asleep whilst doing his job. Now we see him dishing out a stern warning about the place being pretty filthy, the projection room, and threatens to fire him. The guy in question, his face is familiar, and I got a feeling he was in The Sopranos, and I'll have to check that out. Nix returns to the movie tape shop, to get his film back that's been transferred onto so he could get it back, and Sully, the guy who owns the shop, leaks out that he actually took a look at it, and he obviously saw the bit when Nix was emotional, breaking down, describing the incident of the ambush. Nix takes umbrage, saying that Sully promised not to look at the material, and there's a conflict. Nix insisting on paying, and Sully saying he doesn't want any money and he wants to help him, and he sort of leaves abruptly, and then we see him viewing his own material, and we view the aggressive sexual act on the prostitute as he views himself. Damaged people say damaging things to hurt because they can't quite synchronize with the pain. They don't want to identify with the pain that the others experience. So they're prone to blame quickly and assumptions, and come to wrong conclusions. And this exacerbates, of course, mental illness, because when one's mentally ill, one's behaviour is not necessarily tuned into 24-hour sort of empathy with the other person. And so misunderstandings occur very quickly, and that's what we see in this film. Damaged people who hit out and misunderstand. after the disaster with the girl. He tries to telephone her and plead forgiveness and says that he loves her, but to no avail. He then meets up with the black guy again in the diner, who's previously been trying to sell him any drug available. This time he's feeling that low that he suggests to the black guy that he needs something strong. Next minute he's getting a dose of heroin into his veins, courtesy of the terrific service by the black guy. And so he now launches down that road of addiction to forget the pain, the trauma of war, the fact that he can't hold down a genuine relationship, and all the other bits and pieces that are littered around his life. The plot gets almost unbelievable now. There's a phone call from a brother telling him that his mother has died. He then appears in a car with, one assumes, is a policeman, which isn't mentioned in the review that I read, although it is in the credits. And the lead character, Nix, wants the police to provide some movie tapes of, I would assume, some sort of record of something that happened in the war zone, but it's all really sort of unconnected. And then we get another scene where Nix and Marlon meet, and he's done a U-turn and now considers Marlon as a good piece of trash, after desperately asking him to give him something strong, i.e. the heroin. He's now become the opposite, and accuses Marlon of giving it to kids. And it really is a plot extension that is, it's too disjointed, and it doesn't connect. One monologue by Nix about the abhorrent nature of the human condition and how society is basically being destroyed by various groups of the population that are, in his opinion, viewed as despicable. Drug dealers, prostitutes. And then we get into this monologue where he goes on, and it leads him down that road towards being a vigilante. And so the parallels with Taxi Driver become evident, as we recall Travis Bickle's last stand, so to speak, where he shaved his head. He basically clothed himself in military sort of style combat clothes, and of course there was the weaponry, and then he launched his attack on the pimp that was controlling Jodie Foster's character, and he went on the rampage and was clearly psychotic. And this was after he listened to all those promises by the politicians about what was they were going to do when they got into office. And this is once again another sort of move down that same road. Nix goes on the rampage and he takes out his ex-boss, the black guy who supplied him with heroin, and then the girl, the prostitute. Three pretty grotesque acts of violence, stabbings, and garottings. It's all very premeditated, and it leaves a taste in the mouth that suggests, why do we need to be watching this? It's an old sort of message, not particularly well presented, and uh, it, it's a pretty low point, really. And I can't say that I can recommend this shit, unless you're of that ilk where you enjoy violence. Okay, the epilogue to this movie: police officer with Jacob's brother basically listened to the tape and investigated these alleged vigilante killings. There was a fourth, which I failed to remember. And you'll have to watch it if you want to know what transpired from that conversation. Yeah, it's, imagination would help.